Love is supposed to be something that lifts you up. It should make you feel stronger, more confident, more alive. When you're with the right person, you don't feel like you have to constantly recover from your own relationship. But if you're with the wrong person, it doesn't matter how much you convince yourself that it's love. If it's draining you, it's costing you more than it's giving you. And that's not love. That's survival. Think about this for a second. How do you feel when you're around this person? Do you feel energized? Do you feel like the best version of yourself? Or do you feel like you're in a constant state of managing emotions, yours and theirs? A relationship that's right for you won't leave you emotionally exhausted at the end of every conversation, every interaction, every disagreement. But if you're always feeling drained, if you always feel like you have to be on guard, if every conversation feels like a negotiation just to maintain peace, you need to ask yourself, is this love or is this just hard work with no reward? One of the biggest mistakes we make in relationships is mistaking effort for love. We think that because we're giving so much, because we're working so hard to keep things together, that it must mean the relationship is valuable. But love isn't about how much effort you put in, it's about how much joy and peace you get out of it. A healthy relationship requires effort, yes, but it shouldn't feel like you're constantly running on an empty tank just to keep things afloat. If you're giving everything you have and still feeling exhausted, still feeling like it's not enough, then the problem isn't you. The problem is the relationship itself. A relationship should be a source of energy, not a constant drain. When you're with the right person, you don't wake up feeling anxious about how the day will go. You don't spend your time overanalyzing texts, wondering what they meant by something they said, or worrying whether they'll suddenly pull away. You're not afraid to speak your mind because you know that even if there's disagreement, it won't turn into a battle where someone has to win and someone has to lose. You're not walking on eggshells hoping that today is a good day and that nothing you say or do will suddenly change their mood. You might think, but love is supposed to be hard sometimes, right? And yes, every relationship has its struggles. But there's a difference between working through something and constantly working for something that isn't working. The right person brings more ease into your life, not more chaos. The wrong person will leave you feeling like you're always fighting to be heard, to be appreciated, to be loved in the way you deserve. If you constantly feel drained in your relationship, ask yourself, what's really taking up your energy? Are you always the one making the effort? Are you always the one trying to fix things? Are you spending more time worrying about whether they still care than actually enjoying the time you have with them? If the majority of your energy is spent managing the relationship instead of experiencing the joy of it, then it's time to stop and ask yourself, why am I still here? The truth is, sometimes we stay because we're afraid of what happens if we leave. We convince ourselves that all relationships take work, that if we just try harder, love will magically become easier. But love isn't something you have to convince yourself to stay in. If you have to constantly justify why you're with someone, then deep down, you already know the answer. You deserve a relationship that feeds you, not one that starves you. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel lighter, not someone who makes every day feel like an emotional marathon. If you're in a relationship where you feel more exhausted than excited, where you spend more time recovering than enjoying, where you give and still feel empty, then it's time to step back and ask yourself the most important question of all. Is this really love, or is this just fear of letting go? Passion is what draws you in, but values are what keep you together. That initial spark, that chemistry, it's intoxicating. It's the rush of excitement, the late night conversations, the feeling that this person just gets you. But here's the thing, chemistry isn't enough. Attraction might light the fire, but shared values are what keep it burning. And when those values don't align, no amount of attraction, no level of effort, no amount of convincing yourself is going to change the fact that you're trying to build something on shaky ground. Think about it. You've met someone who makes you laugh, makes your heart race, gives you that thrill you haven't felt in ages. But then over time, the little things start to surface. You want deep connection and emotional vulnerability, but they shy away from tough conversations. You crave adventure, spontaneity, and personal growth, but they prefer to stay in their comfort zone. You value family, but they don't make the effort to engage with yours. And at first you tell yourself it's not a big deal, you brush it off, you focus on the good, but deep down there's a tension you can't ignore. When your values don't align, you start compromising in ways that don't feel like healthy compromise. You start sacrificing parts of yourself, your needs, your goals, your boundaries, all in the name of keeping the peace. You convince yourself that love means adjusting, adapting, being flexible. And yes, relationships require compromise, but there's a difference between compromising on preferences and compromising on the core of who you are. If you start silencing yourself just to make things work, if you find yourself constantly trying to bridge the gap between what you want and what they're willing to give, you have to ask, is this really the right fit? Some people stay in relationships not because they're happy, but because they're hopeful. Hopeful that over time things will change. Hopeful that if they just love hard enough, if they're patient enough, if they just explain themselves one more time, the other person will finally see things the way they do. But hope is not a strategy. You cannot build a future on the idea of who someone might become. If they don't value what you value today, there's no guarantee they will tomorrow. And the more time you invest in hoping, the more you risk losing yourself in a relationship that isn't truly fulfilling. You ever notice how in the beginning people show you exactly who they are? They don't always say it outright, but they show it in their actions. If they value respect, they show up for you consistently. If they value growth, they are always pushing themselves to be better. If they value love, they don't just say the right words, they follow through with the right actions. Pay attention to these things early on because they tell you everything you need to know. Too many people ignore the signs because they're so caught up in the feeling, in the potential, in the fantasy of what it could be. Now, let's talk about attraction for a second, because here's where people get stuck. You might meet someone who doesn't share your values, but the attraction is so strong that you try to convince yourself it's enough. Maybe they're fun, exciting, unpredictable. Maybe there's a fire between you that you can't seem to put out, and so you rationalize. You downplay the misalignment. You tell yourself it's just differences in personality or background, not something deeper. But attraction alone does not sustain a relationship. Passion without alignment is chaos. It's a push and pull dynamic that keeps you addicted to the highs and lows, instead of grounded in something real. And here's where it gets even trickier. Sometimes the person you're with isn't even a bad person. They might be kind, loving, well-intentioned, but that doesn't mean they're right for you. The hardest relationships to walk away from aren't the toxic ones. They're the ones that are almost right. The ones where 80% feels good, but that missing 20% is the part that actually matters. And when your values don't align, that 20% will become the thing that eats away at you over time. What does this look like in real life? You're ready for commitment. They want to keep things casual. You believe in personal growth. They resist change. You value honesty, but they avoid tough conversations. And you keep waiting for them to meet you where you are. You keep trying to close the gap, but love shouldn't feel like a negotiation. It shouldn't feel like you're constantly trying to convince someone to show up the way you need them to. When you're with the right person, the right values are there from the start. They don't need to be forced. The biggest mistake people make is thinking they can change someone's values over time. They assume that love will magically transform a person into who they need them to be. But values are deeply ingrained. They come from upbringing, beliefs, life experiences. If someone doesn't see the world the way you do, if they don't prioritize the things you hold dear, it's not your job to make them. And it's not a matter of right or wrong, it's a matter of compatibility. If they're not wrong for being who they are, but they're wrong for you, then the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Because here's the truth. The right relationship won't ask you to betray yourself. It won't require you to constantly justify, explain, or fight to be understood. The right relationship feels like coming home to yourself. And when you find that, you'll realize why nothing before it ever truly worked. There's a simple but painful truth about relationships. When you're with the wrong person, you feel it. Not just in the big moments of conflict, but in the everyday moments where you find yourself holding back, second-guessing, or playing a role that doesn't quite fit. And the reason this is so dangerous is because it happens gradually. You don't wake up one day and suddenly realize you've lost yourself. It happens in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. A comment here, a glance there, a little shift in how you speak, in what you say, and how much you say at all, until one day you look in the mirror and wonder, who have I become? A great relationship should make you feel more like yourself, not less. It should be the place where you can bring your whole, unfiltered, unedited self to the table, knowing that you are safe, accepted, and valued. But when you're with the wrong person, that feeling starts to erode. Maybe at first it's just small things, little moments where you adjust your words, soften your opinions, or downplay your achievements because you've noticed that when you speak up, they seem annoyed, indifferent, or even insecure. And so you start making yourself smaller. You laugh a little less loudly. You express a little less freely. You hold back parts of yourself that once felt effortless to share. And maybe at first you tell yourself that it's normal. Relationships require compromise, right? And sure, they do. But compromise isn't the same as self-erasure. Compromise is meeting in the middle. Self-erasure is walking away from yourself to meet them where they are. A real partnership doesn't make you feel like you need to dim your light to keep the peace. It doesn't leave you exhausted from constantly filtering your personality, your opinions, your dreams. It doesn't make you feel like a guest in your own life. And if you found yourself in a relationship where you feel the need to apologize for simply being who you are, then you have to ask yourself, is this love, or is this just fear of being alone? Because that's often what keeps people stuck. The fear of walking away, the fear of losing the potential, the fear that maybe if you just tweak a little more, if you adjust a little further, if you bend a little harder, then maybe, just maybe, they'll finally give you the love and acceptance you're craving. But love doesn't work that way. Real love doesn't ask you to become less of yourself so someone else can feel more secure. And I know for some of you, there's a voice in your head saying, but they're not a bad person. They don't mean to make me feel this way. And maybe that's true. Maybe they don't do it intentionally. But the impact is what matters. If you feel like you can't be yourself around them, if you feel like you have to shrink to fit into their world, then you're not in the right place. You're not in the right relationship. A great relationship should amplify you. It should remind you of all the things that make you. It should celebrate your quirks, challenge you to grow, and make you feel like more, not less. And when you're with the right person, you don't have to edit yourself. You don't have to constantly calculate how much of yourself is too much. You don't have to wonder if your success, your confidence, your laughter, or your dreams are too big for them, because the right person isn't intimidated by your light. They stand next to you and help you shine even brighter. And if that's not the kind of love you have right now, then I want you to ask yourself, what am I still holding on for? Because you don't need to change who you are to be loved. You don't need to suppress parts of yourself just to keep someone around. The right person will love you for all that you are, not just for the pieces that are convenient for them. So if you feel like you're losing yourself, if you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, if you feel like you're always adjusting and never just being, then maybe, just maybe, you're in the wrong relationship. And if you are, the hardest thing to do is also the most necessary. Walk away. Because your life is too precious, your heart is too valuable, and your happiness is too important to waste in a relationship where you can't fully be yourself. If you find yourself constantly justifying someone's behavior, you need to stop and ask yourself why. Because that right there, that's a sign you're giving more than you're getting. That you're carrying the weight of the relationship on your shoulders, and at some point, you're going to break under it. Relationships shouldn't feel like you're constantly making excuses for why someone isn't showing up for you in the way they should. And yet so many people do this without even realizing it. It starts small. You tell yourself they're just busy, that they're stressed, that they didn't mean what they said, that they'll change, that they'll get better, that things will be different once this phase passes. And you keep telling yourself that over and over again until one day you wake up and realize you've spent more time defending their actions than actually being happy in the relationship. When you love someone, you want to believe the best in them. You want to believe that every shortcoming is just temporary, that every broken promise is just a slip up, that every moment they make you feel unimportant is just a misunderstanding. But here's the truth. If you're always having to justify why someone isn't treating you right, then they're not treating you right. It really is that simple. Love isn't something that needs to be defended. If it's real, it's felt. It's known, it's there in the way they show up, in the way they prioritize you, in the way they make you feel safe. It's not something you should have to convince yourself exists. Think about how much energy you're spending trying to convince yourself and others that this person is worthy of your love. You find yourself explaining to your friends, "Oh, he's just not great at texting," or "She's going through a lot right now. That's why she's been distant." You tell yourself that deep down they do care, they just don't show it in the way you need. And while relationships do require understanding, they should never require you to constantly minimize your own needs just to accommodate someone else's lack of effort. Here's the thing. When someone genuinely cares, they make an effort. It doesn't matter how busy they are, how stressed they are, or how unfamiliar they are with relationships. If they truly value you, they will find a way to make sure you feel important. And if they're not, then maybe the issue isn't that they're busy or stressed. Maybe the issue is that you're trying to fill in the gaps of a love that isn't really there. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They fall in love with the idea of what someone could be instead of seeing them for who they really are. They hold on to those few good moments, those glimpses of love, and convince themselves that this is the real version of their partner. That if they just hold on long enough, if they just love them hard enough, that version will become the reality. But people aren't projects. You can't fix someone into loving you the way you need. And the more you try, the more you end up losing yourself in the process. Because while you're so busy explaining away their shortcomings, who's justifying the way you're being treated? Who's standing up for you? Who's making sure your needs are being met? Let's say you're in a relationship where your partner repeatedly lets you down. They cancel plans at the last minute. They don't communicate. They make you feel like an afterthought. But instead of acknowledging that this isn't okay, you tell yourself they just have a lot on their plate, that they're not good at expressing themselves, that they love you, they just show it differently. And so you lower your expectations. You accept the bare minimum because you've convinced yourself that's all they have to give. But deep down, you know that's not true. Because the truth is, when someone really wants to be with you, they don't make you question their intention. They don't make you feel like you have to work for their love. And they certainly don't leave you wondering if you're asking for too much. You deserve a relationship where love isn't a question mark, where you don't have to play detective trying to decipher their actions, trying to figure out if they really care. You deserve someone who makes their feelings for you clear in the way they treat you, in the way they show up for you, in the way they make you feel valued. And if you're not getting that, then maybe it's time to stop making excuses and start accepting reality. Because here's what happens when you stop justifying someone's behavior. You get clarity. You stop wasting time trying to explain why someone isn't loving you the way you need, and instead you start recognizing that they're simply not the right person for you. And that realization, that's powerful. That's freedom. That's what allows you to walk away and make space for the love you actually deserve. So stop justifying, stop explaining away what you already know deep down. Love isn't something you have to defend. It's something you should feel clearly and effortlessly. And if you're not feeling it, then maybe, just maybe, you're in love with the idea of what could be instead of what actually is. A great relationship isn't just about love. It's about growth. It's about two people pushing each other to become better versions of themselves. Because here's the truth. The right partner will challenge you, encourage you, and inspire you to reach your potential, but the wrong one, they'll make you feel like wanting more is selfish. They'll treat your ambitions as a threat instead of something to celebrate. And if you're with someone who holds you back, you have to ask yourself, why are you choosing comfort over progress? Think about it. You set a goal for yourself, something that excites you, something that makes you come alive. Maybe it's a career move, a fitness journey, a personal passion. And instead of hearing, I believe in you, or I'm proud of you, you're met with indifference. Why do you need to do that? You're fine the way you are. Are you sure you can even pull that off? That's not love. That's fear talking. And that fear, it's not yours, it's theirs. Because when people are insecure, they don't want to see you rise. Your growth forces them to look in the mirror, and they might not like what they see. So instead of stepping up with you, they try to hold you down. They subtly discourage you. They make you feel guilty for wanting more. And over time, you start shrinking. You stop dreaming so big. You tell yourself, maybe I'm asking for too much, but you're not. You're just in a relationship that's keeping you small. The right partner doesn't fear your growth. They invest in it. They see your success as a win for both of you. They encourage you to take risks, to push forward, to go after what you want. They don't just tolerate your dreams. They're your biggest cheerleader. They ask about your progress. They show up for you. They remind you why you started when you feel like quitting. And the best part? They're growing too, because that's what a real partnership looks like. Two people pushing each other to evolve. But what happens when that's not the case? When your ambition feels like a burden? When every time you talk about your goals, you're met with doubt instead of belief? It creates resentment. You start feeling like you have to choose between your relationship and your future. And that's a choice you should never have to make. A relationship should add to your life, not take away from it. Sometimes it's not even about outright discouragement, it's more subtle. Maybe they don't say anything at all. Or they don't ask about that big project you're working on. They don't acknowledge the effort you're putting in. They act as if your achievements don't matter. And that silence, it's just as loud as criticism. Because deep down, you know that someone who truly cares about you would care about the things that matter to you. And here's the thing. You don't need someone to build your life for you. You don't need someone to make your dreams happen, but you do need someone who supports you while you do it. Someone who doesn't make you feel like you're too much for wanting more. Someone who doesn't make you feel guilty for prioritizing your growth. Because love isn't about staying the same. It's about evolving together. So what do you do when you realize you're with someone who doesn't support your growth? You get honest, you communicate, you say, this is important to me and I need a partner who stands by my side. And if they still don't get it, if they still make you feel like your ambition is a problem, then it's time to ask yourself a hard question. Am I willing to stay small to keep this person comfortable? Because the moment you start choosing someone else's comfort over your own evolution, you start losing yourself. And no relationship is worth that. You deserve someone who sees your potential, who believes in you, even when you doubt yourself. Someone who isn't just there for the easy moments, but for the challenges too. Someone who stands beside you as you chase your dreams instead of holding you back from them. And if you're not with that person right now, maybe it's time to move in a direction that allows you to become who you're truly meant to be. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is falling in love with someone's potential rather than who they actually are. This is where so many people get stuck, in this endless loop of waiting, hoping, and convincing themselves that change is just around the corner. It's not. And deep down, you already know that. You meet someone, and there's something about them that pulls you in. Maybe it's their charm, their passion, or the way they talk about their dreams. You see flashes of brilliance, moments where they show up in a way that makes you believe they could be everything you've ever wanted. And that glimpse, that's enough to hook you. That's enough to make you stay even when the reality doesn't match the fantasy you've built in your head. The problem is, a relationship should be built on what's real, not what could be. If you're constantly waiting for someone to become the partner you need, then you're in love with the idea of them, not who they truly are. And the most dangerous part, the longer you wait, the more invested you become. The deeper you go, the harder it gets to leave, because now you've put in time, energy, and emotions, and walking away feels like admitting defeat. But staying means you're choosing to live in a relationship that only exists in your imagination. Think about it. If you're constantly making excuses for why they aren't showing up for you, if you're convincing yourself that one day they'll figure it out, what you're really doing is delaying your own happiness. You're betting on potential instead of reality. And that's a dangerous game, because potential doesn't love you back. Potential doesn't wake up in the morning and make the effort. Potential doesn't choose you today. It only teases you with the promise of tomorrow. And let's be honest, how many times have you seen tomorrow come and go without anything actually changing? How many times have you told yourself, just a little longer? They're going through something, they just need time. They'll get there. How many times have they said, I know I need to be better. I'll do better. I'll change. And yet here you are, still waiting. Now, let's break this down, because some of you might be thinking, but isn't growth a part of every relationship? Don't we all have things to improve? Absolutely. No one is perfect. But there's a difference between someone actively working on themselves and someone who just keeps promising they will. Words mean nothing without action. And if you're with someone who keeps selling you a future they never deliver on, you have to ask yourself, how long am I willing to wait for something that may never happen? People don't change because you love them enough. They change because they decide to. And if you've been waiting for them to wake up and suddenly become the person you need, you have to ask yourself, do they even want to? Do they even see a problem? Or are you the only one carrying this weight, hoping that one day they'll finally become the person you've always believed they could be? Because here's the truth. Someone's potential is not your responsibility. It's not your job to fix them, to heal them, or to mold them into the partner you deserve. Your job is to choose someone who already is the kind of person you want to build a life with, not someone who might be. And if the person in front of you isn't showing up in a way that aligns with your values, your standards, and your needs, then it doesn't matter how much potential they have, it's not enough. What keeps people stuck in these relationships isn't just hope, it's fear. Fear of letting go of the vision they've built, fear of starting over, fear of realizing that they've spent so much time on something that was never going to be what they wanted. But here's the thing, you don't get that time back. The longer you hold on to the wrong person, the longer you delay finding the right one. The longer you make excuses, the more you sacrifice your own happiness, and that's the real cost of loving someone's potential. You end up losing yourself in the process. So if this is resonating with you, if you're hearing this and thinking, this is me, this is my situation, I want you to ask yourself something. If nothing changed, if they stayed exactly as they are right now, would you still be happy in this relationship a year from now, 5 years from now? Would you still choose this version of them? Because if the answer is no, then stop waiting for a version of them that doesn't exist. You deserve someone who chooses you today, not someone you have to chase into tomorrow. You deserve someone whose actions align with their words, someone who doesn't just promise to be better, but is better. And the moment you realize that, the moment you stop settling for what could be and start demanding what is, that's when everything changes. That's when you open the door for the love you truly deserve.